Joseph Stiglitz is a university professor of economics and chair of the Committee on Global Thought at Columbia University and a Nobel Prize laureate. His most recent book, Free Fall: America, Free Markets and Sinking of the World Economy, explains how America exported bad economics, bad policies, and bad behavior to the rest of the world, only to cobble together a haphazard and ineffective response when the markets finally seized up. Drawing upon his expertise, Stiglitz outlines a way forward, building on ideas that he has championed his entire career.
Real income in the United States for most Americans has been going down year after year. Real income in 2008, adjusted for inflation, was 4% below 2000 for the median, the person in the middle. That means, and about 80% of Americans have seen their incomes go down. I think that's about the number. Well, how do you keep a contented population? You say, don't let this little detail bother you. That's just numbers. You pay less taxes because your income is lower, so you should feel better. Go ahead and spend as if your income is going up. Well, obviously, how do you reconcile income going down and spending as if your income is going up? The magic of debt. And how do you sustain that debt? A bubble. But the bubble is not sustainable. And that's why I think there is at least the potential of real social problems ahead. Because that American dream has now smashed into reality. There's a general agreement that the Fed messed up, in leading to the crisis. There are some people who believe that even an arsonist that helps put out the fire should be rewarded. But there are other people who think that there should be some accountability for having started the fire. The question, though, is what was the key mistake? And there are two problems that people have identified. One is low interest rates that fueled the bubble, and the other one is lack of regulation that allowed the bubble and the really, really astoundingly bad lending. In my mind, it's the regulation, and only the regulation. We've had periods of low interest rates where we didn't have bubbles. In the period after World War II, we had low interest rates, good regulation, and we did not have a bubble. And that's true in other countries as well. My book is largely about ideas and the battle of ideas and how this crisis should have an impact on our thinking about these ideas. The most important idea in economics is Adam Smith's idea of the invisible hand. The pursuit of self-interest leads as if by an invisible hand to economic efficiency, to the general well-being. I don't think anybody believes that the bankers' pursuit of their self-interest, which is another name for greed, or has led to the well-being of our society. Now, does that mean that Adam Smith was totally wrong? It certainly should make us think about this doctrine, which is at the center of economic thinking. Now, the answer is that actually economists had long understood why it is that the invisible hand often seems invisible, that it's not there. There are problems of externalities, there are problems of agency that I talked about before. There are a whole set of reasons that markets don't work. But when they don't work, that means, the great virtue of Adam Smith was that we, in our daily life, did not ever have to, in our economic life, never had to ask anything about ethics. It was wonderful. All we had to ask is, what is in my own interest? And therefore pursue that, and then we can feel good about what we're doing. But if Adam Smith's proposition is not true, if it is not true that the pursuit of self-interest leads to the general well-being of society, then there are issues of morality that get raised. And so I think it really changes the moral discourse of our society. I used to joke that before the crisis, I was worried because our theories predicted that there should be really consequences to those bad incentives, and we weren't seeing it in the way that we should. So I can feel relieved now that our theories have been justified. The one thing that economists agree is that incentives matter. If they hadn't had this crisis, we would have had to reject our theories, and we would be in bad shape as a profession. But actually, as a profession, we are in bad shape because a very dominant group of economists, and I'll come to that in a minute, forgot about incentives mattering. And the things got swept up with another set of ideas called efficient markets hypothesis. I'll come back to that, which in the face of it was a very foolish set of ideas, and which played a big role in the justification of the doing nothing about what seemed to me obvious things going bad. 19th century capitalism, you own your firm, you make your decisions, and you bear the consequences. 21st century capitalism, the people who are making the decisions are by and large not the owners. It's worse than that. The people investing in the firms are not investing their own money. They're investing on behalf of other people. So you have what we call agency problems, and as a result, the notion of a separation of ownership and control was talked about 75 years ago, but it's really something that's come home increasingly important, and this agency chain has increased, and that means people don't really bear the consequences, and that means you have incentives to try to cheat your shareholders. And I haven't seen the exact studies, but people have told me that if you look at the returns to shareholders in Goldman Sachs from the time they went private till, say, end of 2008, the shareholders got almost nothing. But the partners, the employees, did very well. So this is new shareholder capitalism. Yes, the managers do well, but not necessarily the shareholders and the bondholders. Many of the people who thought they were wizards didn't really understand finance, didn't understand risk. And that's a really deep problem in our society, because these things are very complex. Now, I don't want to, there are probably some of you that are lawyers here, and I don't mean to make any denigrating remarks about lawyers, but to have the head of these complex financial institutions managing risk be lawyers who don't understand anything about risk analysis is a little disturbing. And I won't name any names, but I think you can figure out who I'm talking about. But the point is, they wouldn't know a fat-tailed distribution if they saw one. They don't know what correlations mean. They don't know what concepts of asymmetric information. All the things that went into the failure, they were unaware of. And among the things that they still don't understand is incentives. Because if they understood incentives, they would understand that their incentive structures were encouraging short-sighted behavior and excessive risk-taking. They were giving the same reward for, to use the technical language, for increasing beta, increasing risk. Anybody can do that and get a higher average return, versus increasing alpha, which means doing better than the market at a given level of risk. Almost no one can do that. So you want, in principle, to encourage alpha. You don't want to encourage beta. They didn't make any distinction. And anybody that has an incentive structure like that, I say, doesn't know what he's doing. Clearly, we need a second stimulus. We need a jobs tax credit, a jobs program. But the anxiety about the deficit is creating opposition. I think it's very foolish in the sense that even if you think that we should be focused on the debt, you should be focused on the long-term debt, not the short-term debt. And if you spend money on investments in infrastructure, technology, education, the long-term debt will be lower by spending more money now.